Give you an idea of how to handle a scientific method lab. Well, the first thing you should do when you get into the lab is read the background. Now, it's actually pretty useful. I think you'll understand most of it, and it will give you a very idea of why you're doing what you're doing. So looking at the procedure, here's what you're going to do. So here's the story. Let's look at the materials. You've got a little mouse here, and these are the different foods that you are going to feed the mouse, including water as well. So your first step here is to make a hypothesis, because of course the point of this is to determine, well, what's the best thing to feed the mouse so it gains the most weight. Now, initially you're probably not going to know exactly which one of these is going to be the best. You might have some suspicions or theories, but at this point you really don't know. So it doesn't matter which one you pick. Speaking for myself, I'd say that water is probably not the best choice, because I know from personal experience that feeding something just water is probably not going to lead to a great deal of weight gain. So I think one of these other foods here would probably be the best hypothesis if I was making the hypothesis. But you can choose whatever you want for your first hypothesis. It'll either be proven true or it won't be proven true by your experiments. Alright, so looking at the procedure, the first thing it asks you to do is get a light box and a balance from the instruments. So we'll put a light box down here, and the balance will go down here as well. I'll put it over here. The next thing we need is a mouse cage. We get that from the containers shelf. I'll stick it here. That's why I left a nice gap in between the balance and the light box, so I could put this cage in here as well. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to weigh the cage. Now what's going to happen is that the cage is going to weigh something. In this case it weighs 1000.000 grams. Now we don't really need to know the mass of the cage. It's going to be pretty much the same in each case, I imagine. But we're going to zero the balance and make it 0 so that when we stick a mouse in, we'll be able to weigh just the mouse. And that's all we're interested in at the end anyway, is just the mass of the mouse after it's eaten its food. Alright, so what we're going to do next is take a mouse. So we'll get the mouse from the materials over here. We'll stick him in the cage. There he goes. And you can see that we have a mass of the mouse right here, and you can see he's just sticking his head out from underneath here. So you know he's there. Plus you can see there's an increase in the mass on the balance. That must be just the mass of the mouse, since we zeroed out the balance when we put the cage on it. Right, now we definitely need to make sure we write down that mass, so you'll put that in your lab notes and you'll make sure that gets recorded. The next thing we need to do is take a petri dish from the containers shelf and this is what's going to contain our food. It says now take cooked macaroni from the materials shelf and place 1 unit of food in the petri dish. Cooked macaroni is the positive control for this experiment. So we're going to use cooked macaroni. Now I don't know if cooked macaroni is going to be the best thing to feed the mouse, to get the most weight gain, but that doesn't really matter. We're just trying something for now just to see what it does. So I've got the cooked macaroni. I stick it on the petri dish and it says how many units to add. It says to add 1 unit, so I'm going to put in 1 unit. I click OK. Now I've got 1 unit of food in that petri dish. Now it says place the petri dish of food in the mouse cage. Be sure to click the bottom of the petri dish to move the dish and the food in or out of the mouse cage. Alright, so that's what I'm going to do. Obviously this food doesn't weigh anything, but that's okay. Now it does weigh something, but it doesn't really matter. I'm not interested in the mass of the food right now. It's all going to be the same. It's all 1 unit that we're adding. Now this cage needs to go in the light box. So it's in the light box now. And I need to run the light box on these settings. It says 1 day, 21.5 degrees Celsius. So I click that 1 day, 21.5 degrees, and then I click start. Now this obviously isn't going to take a day. We'll see how long it takes. There we go, it's on. Oh, it's already done. There we go, short day. No worries. So now we're going to take this out of the we're going to remove the petri dish from the cage once we take the cage out of the light box. Now we don't want to weigh the food. So I click So click on the food here. There we go. So it looks like you have to click the bottom of the bowl to get it out. There we are. And that goes in the recycle bin. Right, so now we put the cage back on the balance and we'll see what we have here. Now that is the new mass of the mouse. If we've been feeding it something, chances are it's going to be higher than what it was. So that's what's happening here. Obviously you want to write down this mass, this new mass, and then that will allow us to calculate a change in the mass of the mouse. So what you're going to do is, let's go back to the, actually we'll look at the lab manual in a minute. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to run this experiment again and we're going to replicate it. After you've determined all of these different foods and what mass they get in the mouse, then we can make a hypothesis or change our hypothesis to determine what food is going to be the best for the mouse. Let's take a look at the lab manual now. Now here's where you're going to put your answers. So as you can see here, you have a hypothesis first and you have to choose one of those foods. It doesn't matter which one. And then you have to design the experiment. Now you want to design the experiment here to make sure that all the conditions are set and they're going to be the same for each food. And here is the starting mass of the mouse and here is the ending mass of the mouse. So you're going to write each of these down for each of these foods and those go in your lab notes and then they go here in your results. Make sure you write them in grams and make sure you record the masses exactly as they appear on the balance. Now it says the change in mass. Well, the change in mass is obviously going to be the difference. It'll be the ending mass minus the starting mass, and that'll be the change in mass. Now, it could be that you might get a negative value, especially if you're feeding something to the mouse that doesn't really increase its mass. So be prepared for that. It's possible that a negative value might exist. That means the mass of the mouse has gone down, and that's quite possible. The next thing you're going to do is replicate the experiment. So what you should do is, I think what I would do is I would choose the one that had the most mass and make that most change in mass and make that my positive control. The negative control, I think I'd choose something that that didn't increase the mass of the mouse or perhaps even made the mass of the mouse go down. And then what you want to do is you want to choose an experimental food, 1, 2, and 3, and obviously this food has to be the same for each trial. Because what you're trying to do is replicate the experiment and really determine if this food is going to be the best food to feed the mouse. So again, you'll run the experiment. You'll get a starting mass and an ending mass for the positive control. And then for the experimental foods, I think I would again choose one that was going to increase the mass of the mouse by a lot and run that same food 3 times. After that, you can get a change in the mass and we can determine if the results were what we expected them to be, and we can determine which food is going to be the best one to feed our mouse.